Evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Saturday night, 16 minutes past the hour of 11 p.m. As Tunisia take on Mali in the round of 16 at the Africa Cup of Nations at 2025, being hosted in Morocco. Prior to that, Senegal did advance to the quarterfinals following an emphatic victory over Sudan. So we'll be looking at that. But also, Arsenal just survived a Bournemouth scare to win that game at the Vitality Stadium, a place where they lost last season by 2-0. I will be talking about that as well in tonight's broadcast. So please do indulge me for the purposes of tonight's broadcast as we go through the latest from the world of football. Of course, we'll be getting other results from elsewhere. In as far as the Spanish La Liga is concerned, the Italian Serie A and the French Ligue 1 action is continuing as we speak from the multiple spheres of league football. So yeah, plenty of action happened today. Aston Villa back to winning ways, while Nottingham Forest were inflicted on their fourth consecutive defeat. Today, Brighton back to winning ways, while West Ham lost to Wolves as Wolves registered their first victory of the Premier League season. So, like I said, there is plenty for us to discuss in today's broadcast. There is a lot to talk about in as far as today is concerned. Okay. Anyways, it is what it is. Okay. Just having our audios tested to make sure everything does check out properly well before we proceed with tonight's broadcast. But it appears we are good to go. It appears we are good to go. In as far as tonight's broadcast is concerned. We'll be following, of course, the events from the Africa Cup of Nations between Tunisia and Mali. As we speak, the game is still goalless between the two sides. Remember, our prediction on the channel was that Mali will advance at the expense of Tunisia. And then, of course, earlier on, our prediction was right that Senegal would get the better of Sudan. Even though Sudan had made it out of the group, I wasn't too convinced by their own performances to say that they would make it beyond the round of 16. So, yeah, it is what it is in that particular case. And this one is still goalless. That tells you Mali defensively solid. All right. Okay. We'll leave that out of today's discussion. But yeah, where do we start the conversation from? I think AFCON is a good place to start. This is the time when we're going to see some teams be a bit conservative. Mali have defended really well in the opening half. I did not catch much of that action beyond the reviews that I was following up on. I was in transit during the course of that first half, and now you have that action proceeding. Oh, Jesus Christ! There's a tab on my device that I need to mute, but I'm struggling to locate it. Okay. Good. If you're just joining us, welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is my name, and I'm streaming to you live from Kampala, Uganda, where we're having this discussion about the Premier League this weekend and the Africa Cup of Nations. Like I told you, actions opened at 7 p.m. When Sudan knocked out. When Senegal knocked out Sudan, beating them by 3 goals to 1. Abdallah opened the scoring for Sudan in as early as the 6th minute, but they couldn't hold on to that because Kweye scored a brace as well as Ibrahim Baye turned goal scorers as Senegal went on to win their game. That was Pape Gueye as well as Ibrahim Baye were the goal scorers as Senegal won that game by 3 goals to 1 to advance to the quarterfinals of the Africa Cup of Nations 2025. As we speak, we are at the 1 hour mark of the game between Mali and Tunisia, and neither side is yet to see the back of the net. So that action is continuing. There's been some beautiful interplay between Mali, just as much as there has been for Tunisia, but none is yet to find the breakthrough. Tunisia will be hoping that former Manchester United midfielder Hanbo Mejbri can inspire them, perhaps to a victory here, because they've not done well in so many editions of the Africa Cup of Nations. They've not lived to the billing ever since they won the competition back in 2004. They've struggled to win games at the tournament, So, if anything, they have the world to convince that they are really, really capable of doing good things. But for me, I feel that they are oftentimes a good team and they just can't cut it. You remember that elite Belgium team, but at least that Belgium team would compete and get to the semi-finals of competitions. You remember that Belgium that had Axel Witsel, Thorgan Hazard, Eden Hazard, Romelu Lukaku, Kevin De Bruyne, Toby Alderweireld, Thomas Vermaelen, Thibaut Courtois, as some of their stars. It was a star-laden team. I think Nassar Chadli, was it Nassar Chadli? I stand to be corrected, but that cohort of players that were under the charges of Roberto Martinez, who had Thierry Henry as his deputy or assistant manager, at that. But in all competitions, whether the Euros or the World Cup, they failed to cut it. They just fell short. They just constantly fell short. I think they reached the semi-finals. Was it the semi-finals of the World Cup 2018? And then the other example we can look at is Ivory Coast. For those of you that have followed football long enough, you remember that Ivory Coast of Salomon Kalou, Didier Drogba, Yves Tebire, Habib Koro Toure. They had so many very good players, and yet the AFCON, eluded them until some of those stars, rested from the game or stepped down from the national team. And as soon as they stepped down, it was more like a blessing in disguise. They went on to win it in 2015. Ivory Coast went on to win it. You remember that team that had Yaya Toure, during his prime days at Manchester City. So that's football. That's football. So even Tunisia have not lived to the expectations or to the billing of what we often expect of them. But yeah, Philip says, hi, Philip. Good to have you on the broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. So we'll be following updates from that game as we proceed with this broadcast. But I want to bring you up to speed on the results that did transpire earlier on, with Ollie Watkins scoring at the death of halftime to give Aston Villa the lead against Nottingham Forest to end it 1-0 at halftime, while John McGinn scored a brace in the second half, with Morgan Rogers providing the assist for Ollie Watkins, Matty Cash and Yuri Tillemans providing the assist for John McGuinn's brace in the second half, while Morgan Gibbs-White scored the only consolation for Nottingham Forest as they got beat for the fourth consecutive time this season. In as far as the Premier League is concerned, they've lost 4 consecutive games, which is not really, really pretty for Sean Dyche, there, the manager at Nottingham Forest. It's our prediction had been a 2-1 victory for Aston Villa because I thought Nottingham Forest were not the team that were going to stop them from that were going to continue what would have passed for a blip of form following their 4-1 defeat at the hands of Arsenal at the Emirates Stadium on Tuesday. On Tuesday. Asaba Dennis says, hi to you, Kisambira. You remind me of somebody who was called Kisambira Michael. I do not remember where I met Kisambira Michael, but I do remember that name, either somewhere in primary school or high school, one of the two, But thank you so much, Asaba Dennis, for joining the conversation there. I hope your name sounds Ugandan. I hope you're in Uganda. I know Uganda does not have monopoly over has no monopoly over names like Asaba, but it does sound Ugandan, and I hope you're a Ugandan joining the conversation this evening. So, speaking of Nottingham Forest, of course, like I was saying, they've lost to Aston Villa, they lost to Everton by 2-0, they lost to Manchester City by 2-1, and they lost to Fulham by 0-0 in some of their last league outings. That was in the aftermath of dismissing Tottenham Hotspur, who they beat by 3-0. So subsequent results have not been really, really pretty. We are talking about a Nottingham Forest side that went away to Anfield and thrashed Liverpool convincingly by 3-0. So really, I do not know what's happened to this Sean Dyche side, but they are not posting the desired results. So today, John McGinn scored in the 49th minute and the 73rd minute of the second half to ensure that they won that game by 3-0. Realist, Morgan Gibbs White's goal came in the 61st minute, while it was 2-0 to pull one back for Nottingham Forest, with Bakwa providing the assist. Now, Nottingham Forest is one of those teams that signed a cohort of good players that have not lived to the bidding. Players like Dylan Bakwa, players like Danny Ndoye, players like Omar Hudson, they've not really, really lived to the bidding. Players like Douglas Luiz, these are the kinds of players that you would have banked on, for Nottingham Forest to be very, very competitive this season. And Evangelos Marinakis either must be regretting parting ways with Nuno Espirito Santo prematurely at the start of the season, or his decision to appoint his friend Edu Gaspar Dawood as the head of football for his clubs, and because he led the recruitment in the summer for Nottingham Forest. Now, it's not to say that they will not work out totally, but so far it's not, things have not really, really worked out, So we'll have to wait and see in the long run. But Sean Dyche seems to be living on thin ice because, as we've seen, Nottingham Forest have not been afraid to chop off, people in terms of managers. They've already sacked 2, including Nuno Espirito Santo's successor in Ange Postecoglou, who only lasted 8 games. So, it's not the desirable result that they would have hoped for coming into today's game. Then quickly, in the other results, Brighton returned to winning ways with a 2-0 victory over Burnley. They beat Burnley by 2-0 with Ruta and Yassine Ayari scoring in either half in the 29th minute and 47th minute, respectively, to ensure that Brighton returned to winning ways with a 2-0 victory over Burnley. Then Wolverhampton Wanderers, arguably the game of the weekend, if not of just today, because there's plenty of action to come tomorrow with as many as 6 games. Maybe tomorrow's games will have plenty to offer, but today you have to feel happy for Wolves. It's no indication that they will survive relegation. However, with the games left to play, it's not an impossible dream for them to survive relegation. Nonetheless, I do not know if there is ever been a team in history that went on to lose 17 out of the 19 opening fixtures of the Premier League that survived. I do not know. The reason as to why I say it is still possible is because 17th place Nottingham Forest are only 12 points ahead of them. 12 points is a result of 4 victories in 4 games. So they can catch up to that, if then they can go on, if they can use this victory to sort of inspire them to better things to salvage their season. But as they salvage their season, because Arias and Wang Hee-chan, Arias scored in the 4th minute, Wang Hee-chan came up with the penalty in the 31st minute, while Mane scored in the 41st minute to win it for Wolverhampton Wanderers. It was 3-0 at halftime, and the second half saw no goals. Now, if you want to understand the pain of losing this game or the implications of losing this game, go and watch the footage of Nuno Espirito Santo after the final whistle as he left Molineux. Because as soon as that whistle is blown, he quickly turns and walks into the tunnel. Now, Rob Edwards looked over to try and come and shake his hand and realized he had already left. Now, it took, I think, the camera to show us a more magnified image of him exiting as soon as they blew that final whistle. That's how bad this result is for West Ham. That's how bad this result is for West Ham. Because you can't be fighting against relegation and you get thrashed by a team that's not won a single game all season. And you don't even score a goal. So West Ham themselves have been really, really poor this season. And although Nuno Espirito Santo can take or should take blame or responsibility for some of the results, or if not all the results they've gotten ever since he took over, I do not think he is entirely to blame. I do not know the kind of manager that you can bring in at West Ham to salvage their reputation or to save them from relegation. Maybe you'd have to go for a Nigel Pearson, or to recall some other guys out of retirement, or pick up a Jose Mourinho of some sort, excuse me, to get this team firing. Now, one of the things or the characteristics that we know of a Nuno Espirito Santo team is that they are often conservative. Oftentimes, they do not concede too many goals. Once in a while, they concede plenty. For example, last season when he was still at Nottingham Forest, they lost by 7, was it 7-0 or 7-1 against Brighton? Very, very terrible result. But overall, his teams do not concede 1 too many goals. 2, they play in such a conservative manner and on counterattacks that it limits the damage that is often caused to them, especially when he gets his team firing. Now, speaking of getting a team firing, I do not think there is a point in time that he has felt that he has gotten this team firing. Yes, they may be missing a player or two who are away for AFCON, but that is no justification for the kind of results they are posting in the Premier League. Unfortunately for them, their next game is a relegation derby. Why? Because the next game comes up against Nottingham Forest, who are fighting not to drop into the bottom 3. Really, West Ham are fighting to get out of the bottom 3. That's why it's a relegation derby. So West Ham are 18th on the Premier League table with 14 points, and Nottingham Forest are 17th with 18 points. If you're West Ham, it's a must win, because then you close the gap from 4 points to a mere point. But just because it's a must game, or just as much as it is a must game for West Ham, the same applies for Nottingham Forest. Win that game and go to 21 points, and extend that gap between you and West Ham United. So that will be the context of that very fixture when the two sides meet in their next Premier League outing. But I mean, I'm really, really lost for words to describe this West Ham side. I mean, they've lost 4 of the last 5 fixtures, and they only have 1 draw, which was the 2-all draw against Brighton. Now, when you see the team that took a 2-0 lead against Aston Villa, a team that fought until losing by a mere goal 2-0 against Fulham, a team that fought for a 2-all draw against Brighton, you ask, where was it against Wolverhampton Wanderers? You know? My challenge with West Ham this season is that they cannot defend. They cannot defend. That's my challenge with them. And when you look at the Premier League table, I think they're one of the teams that have shipped in very many goals, as many as 41. They've shipped in more goals than any other side in the top flight, because even Wolves, who are bottom, have conceded at least a goal less. They've conceded 40. Now, they struggle to score because they've only scored 21, and yet they concede a lot. That's been their key challenge this season. And the sooner Nuno Espirito Santo finds solutions, the better they can be to try and salvage this season and at least avoid relegation at all costs. Otherwise, it's not looking pretty for them. So they lost that game. And then in the late kickoff at 8:30 p.m., Arsenal. Prince Nkosi says, good evening, bro. Your team won. I'm sure you're happy. Congratulations. Property Master says hi. Hi to you too. Hi, Prince Nkosi. Yeah, I'm happy my team won, but I'm disappointed in the manner in which they won. Forgive me for nitpicking, but they made things difficult for themselves. For those of you that are wondering what I may be talking about, is that while I'm a football fanatic and enthusiast, as first number one priority, I also that was an Arsenal fan. Now, I was watching today's game, and if Arsenal do not cut out the kind of mistakes through which they are conceding goals, then it may be a long season for them in as far as their title ambitions go. For a team that conceded only 3 goals in the opening 7 games, was it 7 or 9 games of the season? They've now conceded 11 since then. Twice, they've conceded 2 goals. Actually, thrice, they've conceded 2 goals this season. Against Aston Villa, against Sunderland, and today against Bournemouth. Now, in any of those fixtures, there's at least one avoidable goal. There's at least one avoidable goal. Against Aston Villa, if Eberechi Eze his man, keeps an eye on Matikash, possibly Matikash doesn't score that goal, he puts in the block. Between Mali and Tunisia, my prediction is for Mali to go through. I do not know what the final score is going to be. It could be a narrow victory before the end of 90 minutes. We could see extra time. We could see penalties. But my gut feeling or my heart is with Mali to advance at the expense of Tunisia. That's my prediction, you know? So I hope I'm right, or I hope I get it right. So when you look at today's game, Gabriel Magalhaes committed a halwa and gifted Evan Nilsson a goal on a silver plate. The playing out of the back, he's passed the ball and he literally passes it to Evan Nilsson. Now, of course, he did not intend it that way. In his mind, he was thinking there's an Arsenal player, because before he gets past the ball, he glances over, and I do not know if he misregisters in his brain where William Saliba is or any of those midfielders, but I suspect he misregisters where William Saliba is, or he miscues that ball. The way it lands on his boot, maybe that's not how he intended to pass it. But in the 10th minute, he passes the ball to Evanilson, who takes the gift with open arms and scores in the 10th minute to give Bournemouth the lead, a much needed lead. Fortunately for him, he fought hard enough to make amends, and he went on to score in the 16th minute to restore parity for the Arsenal, and so it was 1-1 by the 16th minute. Hi, Pedri, how are you doing, my brother? I like your cut. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pedri. So that was the nature. Now, the first half in itself, like I said, I felt, I don't know, it was typical Arsenal. Pass the ball around with no actual end product in terms of the final third. They're struggling to create chances. They're struggling to create goal-scoring opportunities. They had one brilliant moment in that first half through Noni Madueke, who created the chance for himself, and then he blazed it over the bar. He went for power, other than trying to place that ball into the back of the net. Shout out my friend Dick, and Dick always watches your video, but is shy to talk. Shout outs to Dick, your friend. So yeah, in that first half, you struggle to remember the kind of chances, the kind of opportunities that Arsenal may have created, Other than that, of course, you had Noni Madueke, who looked a bit sharp, but again, his final product was a bit lacking for me. He was very integral in that equalizer that Gabriel Magalhaes scores, because he caused all the disruptions in that box. He looked sharp, but his finishing touch is still lacking. I think I would compare Noni Madueke slightly with the Raheem Sterling at Liverpool. Oftentimes, he did the right things, but his finishing touch or his final touch disappointed him the most. And Noni Madueke is that kind of player at present, He's the kind of player who is capable of dribbling past any defender, both skillfully and by pace, and then he fills himself with the final product. So that's how I look at it. Anyways, they came back for the second half and made amends, because in the 54th minute, it was a bit of a cutback from Martin Odegaard, who provided the assist as Declan Rice squad to make it 2-1 in the 54th minute. And then Bukayo Saka, a second half substitute, who had replaced Noni Madueke, because after slightly after the 1 hour mark, Mikel Arteta made 3 changes, withdrawing Victor Gyökeres, Gabriel Martinelli, and Noni Madueke, who started as the front 3, to replace them with Gabriel Jesus, Bukayo Saka, and Leandro Trossard. So Bukayo Saka provided the assist as Declan Rice got his brace in the second half, in the 71st minute, to make it 3-1. Now, even when that goal went in, I still did not feel comfortable that Arsenal had the game in their stride, that they had a strong grip to the game. It always felt that Bournemouth were bound to steal away moments. And indeed, 4 minutes later, a second half substitute in Kropi scored a brilliant goal in the 76th minute to make it 3-2 for a bit of a nervous ending for the Arsenal. That goal that Kropi scores, Arsenal sleep on the job. They do not close down spaces. Martin Odegaard, Bukayo Saka, all suspicious in that moment. They are hesitant. Kropi gets past the ball, and as soon as he takes his turn, Martin Odegaard turns into Robbie Lyle. He becomes a spectator himself, and he watches on. Bukayo Saka felt like he had been surprised to be in the position he was in instead of making movement to close down the space, he did not. And Krupi decides to go for goal from distance, and he beats David Raya. It was a brilliant strike, by the way. But Arsenal were the architects of their own failure today, or all their shortcomings. I've told you in the first half, Gabriel Magalhaes, blind passes the ball to Evan Nilsson. I'm sure he was not the intended target, but it's a great gift. David Raya is out of position, and Evan Nilsson scores into an empty net. And then here for the second goal, they do not close down those spaces. So it felt that way. In the first half, Declan Rice felt like a player who was returning from a long-term injury. I do not know whether he was scared to overcommit or he played with the handbrake on. He seemed to move with a bit of caution. He did not overcommit into going in for hard tackles. I felt his pace was a bit off. He looked unfit or half fit, depending on how you describe it. In fact, before he scores the second goal, I was one of those advocating for his withdrawal, for us to have maybe a Christian Nogard on that pitch for fresh running legs, particularly to help with the defensive bit of it, and then push Martin Zubimendi into that number 8 role because he can't play it, for Arsenal to have a bit of more control in midfield. While they dominated possession to the tune of 57% compared to 43% of Bournemouth, you never felt confident with Arsenal that they had the game within their stride, that they had the ball by both horns. It never felt that way, at least not for me, So, and eventually, Bournemouth had 15 shots on goal with only 3 on target. Really, Arsenal had 12 on goal and 5 on target. So, I thought Bournemouth created so many moments in which they could have scored. David Raya had to be alert. He did not make too many saves. In fact, I think he made only 1 save. But that midfield lacked grit. I don't know. It felt like a downgrade of their own exhibition of energy. Now, while one would argue that it's understandable because they played perhaps 1 too many games in quick succession, you feel that Mikel Arteta needs to do better in terms of the rotation of his team. Today, he rotated the wingers, giving Noni Madueke the hour to start and Gabriel Martinelli. That was good. But even in that midfield, first of all, I did not expect Declan Rice to start the game, as one of those who thought perhaps he needed an extra bit of rest, that maybe he would come off the bench. But of course, the gaffer thought otherwise, and we'll leave that to him, Now, I understand that in title-winning seasons, or for champions, you often have those kinds of players that will play literally every game of football that there is to play. Oftentimes, we make reference to Rodrigo Cascante, who played, I think, every minute that there was to play in the 2022-2023 Premier League season, when Manchester City went on to win the treble, the Premier League, then the FA Cup, and the UEFA Champions League, So that bit is understandable. But we are talking about a player who a couple of days had a swollen knee. And like I said, knee injuries can be a bit tricky. You never know what you have until it's either too painful or otherwise, So it's that difficult. But the tempo at which Arsenal played that game felt like they had a bit of tired bodies. Now, I understand they also played with a bit of caution. In any case, that's what they do. They play with a lot of caution, you feel. And they gave Bournemouth respect, knowing that they were away from home, and this is the only team that beat them home and away last season, perhaps for a reason. But I felt there was that element lacking, that element of fastness, particularly that we saw against Aston Villa in the second half. That bit of sharpness, we did not see it. Gabriel Jesus, when he comes on, he played like a player who had already scored a hat-trick in that game. He was not hungry enough. He did not feel hungry enough for me, in my opinion. Meanwhile, Tunisia have scored a goal to very late on, in around the 8th minute or 89th minute. It did appear offside, but I mean, you must feel for Mali, who have been down to 10 men since the 26th minute. And Koulibaly got that red card and they were reduced to 10 men. Of course, it's always going to be a mountain to climb for a team that is down to 10 men. And they fought a good fight. But the goal appears to have stood. I thought it did appear offside, but the flag did not go up. I think we have checked it out. And there they fall. The goal in itself, you remember against Zambia, Patson Daka scored late on in the first minute of stoppage time to restore parity against Mali, and it finished 1-1. That's what it feels like. It feels like a reminiscence of that. But yeah, for Arsenal, I thought there was a couple of underperformers. David Raya's distribution was a bit lacking for me today. Urian Timber, it felt like a 50-50 kind of performance. Defensively, he did well, but when it came to venturing forward, I felt like he did not do enough. Same applied for Pierre Hincapié, who started at left back. Martin Odegaard I thought he did well. He provided one assist, but I'm always disturbed by how he operates. Now, I know that perhaps that's how Arteta wants the team to operate, or that's how naturally he operates, but there's a point where he's playing as a 6. And the way Arsenal play with their 6 is that the fullbacks move high up the pitch, and then the 6 pulls in between the 2 center backs as though he's a third center back. But there's a moment in that game, I think in the first half, Martin Odegaard goes literally in the back line, and it's Gabriel Magalhaes carrying the ball forward. And I'm thinking to myself, you're the playmaker of the team. You're supposed to be the architect of every attacking move. Why are you lagging behind? And suddenly, Gabriel Magalhaes is even pushing further forward ahead of you. That cannot be the case. Now, for different moments, I can understand if it's Declan Rice or Martin Zubimendi swapping roles with any of the center backs if they moved up front, but it's Odegaard, oftentimes behind Sometimes I feel that he drifts too far behind to impact the game positively in the offensive sense of it. Some of the things that he does are the things that you want Declan Rice and Martin Zubimendi to be doing for you. Coming deep to the defense, pick up that ball and drive it forward. So sometimes I feel like he does a lot in the wrong areas. We are accustomed to him being the leader of the Arsenal press. Now, that he still does, although not at great success and strength, as is done previously, in my opinion. But I feel he drifts a little too deep to affect the game. And that means that he's going to be absent at some moments in the areas in which he's supposed to be. I don't know how many times I've thought there's a gaping hole in where the number 10 should be occupying when Arsenal go in offense. You look around and one of the wingers, Trossard, Madueke, Saka, is looking for support. And Martin Odegaard is nowhere to be seen. You know? But it is what it is. So then, the other key moment of the game was when the referee brought the game to a stop. At the time was 6 minutes, and Bournemouth win a throw in a good area, the kind of area where the squad against Chelsea. Antoine Semenyo makes the throw in. The first ball is defended, and Bournemouth win the ball back to try and put it back in the box. And before they do so, the referee blows the final whistle. So much to the fury of some of those Bournemouth players. Now, two things. To the latter of the law, the referee was right. Time was up, based on his clock. In any case, he would have stopped them from even taking the throw in the first place, because time was up. If it's 6 minutes of added time, by that time, it felt like time was up. But also, to Bournemouth's defense, I completely understand. If I were in their shoes, if I were a Bournemouth fan, if I were a Bournemouth player, I would have felt the same way they felt. That we have a last-minute gossip of a chance to put that ball in the box and perhaps score an equalizer, or perhaps create a moment that defines this game. And then the referee denied them that. So it's his prerogative to blow the whistle when he sees fit, especially if it's the final kick of the game or when time is up. But I really, really felt for Bournemouth. The Arsenal fan in me was happy that the game finished. But the football fan in me, the pundit in me, the commentator in me, I felt for those Bournemouth players. If it had been Arsenal with roles reversed, I'd be furious, both as a fan or as a player on the pitch. So it's completely understandable that they reacted with the way they reacted, by surrounding the referee at the blow of the final whistle. And one of the Bournemouth assistant coaches came and spoke to the referee to have his own, to have his words with Chris Kavanagh about that action, to express his displeasure. And eventually, Andoni Iraola walks on and is the one that pushes away the Bournemouth players to say, go away, I'll have the conversation on your behalf. So really, they felt hard done by. But Arsenal were happy to win the game by 3 goals to 2. But for me, there were some negatives in there. I thought they did not create enough. I thought they made the game a bit slow. Meanwhile, Sinayoko scored a late minute penalty in added time to restore parity for Mali. That means 10-man Mali go into extra time against Tunisia. For Mali, it's still a whole mountain to climb, given that they are down a man less. But there's that cliche that it's harder to beat 10 than 11 in a football match. Why? Because 10 men play as though every player plays as though they are filling the void for the player that was sent off. So really, it's 1-1 after 90 minutes. We're headed for extra time. It's the first AFCON game that will be heading to extra time because it's only the second game of the knockout stages at the round of 16. You know, at the first one, like I said, was won by Senegal, beating up against Sudan by 3 goals to 1. Pape Gueye scoring a brace in that one, as well as Ibrahim Baye, the goal scorers there for Senegal, and Abdallah for Sudan, you know. So anyways, we'll leave it at that. So that was the game for the Arsenal. But what the result meant was that they moved 6 points clear on the summit of the Premier League table, 48 points after 20 games. That means they've won 5 games in a row. Earlier on, of course, Aston Villa had won to move to 42 points, which meant that Arsenal were only 3 points ahead of them prior to kickoff. But also, it means that because Aston Villa won, they leapfrogged Manchester City, who are now third with 41 points, are waiting to play their game against Chelsea tomorrow. So here is what you should expect from the Premier League tomorrow. Declan Rice in the Arsenal game was voted man of the match for his brace. Leeds will come up against Manchester United at 3:30 p.m. Our prediction was a 1-1 draw for that one. Speaking of predictions, it was a win for Aston Villa. I thought it would be a draw for Burnley and Brighton, but Brighton won. I thought it was going to be a 2-1 victory for West Ham. Wolves won. I thought it was going to be a 2-0 victory for Arsenal over Bournemouth, but Arsenal won, but it was not a 2-0 victory. So that's how we performed. We lost 2 and won 2, the victories. So tomorrow, our prediction was a 1-1 draw between Manchester United and Leeds, and then Everton will be up against Brentford at 6 p.m. Fulham will take on Liverpool at the same kickoff time, while Newcastle will take on Crystal Palace. Our prediction was a 1-1 draw between Everton and Brentford, then a 1-1 draw between Fulham and Liverpool, and then a 3-1 victory for Newcastle over Crystal Palace. A goalless draw between Tottenham Hotspur and Sunderland at 6 p.m. and then let on Manchester City to beat up against Chelsea by 3-1. Those are our predictions for those respective games. Anyways, quickly, to move on quickly, in the other results from the weekend, in as far as things go. Excuse me. Meanwhile, at halftime, it's still goalless between Barcelona and Espanyol in the Catalonia derby, you know. So Celta Vigo beat up against Valencia by 4-1. Osasuna and Athletic Bilbao shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw, while Villarreal went away to Elche and beat them by 3-1. At halftime, like I've told you, Espanyol and Barcelona is still goalless in the Catalonia derby, while in the Italian Serie A, Como beat up against Udinese by 1-0 in that game. And then in the other results, still from the Italian Serie A, Genoa and Pisa shared the spoils in a 1-1 draw, as did Sassuolo against Parma, and Juventus against Lecce was also a 1-1 draw. As we speak, in the 54th minute, Atlanta are leading up against AC Roma by 1-0. In the French League 1, AC Monaco will be beat up against Lyon. Lyon beat up against AC Monaco by 3-1, while Nice and Strasbourg shared the spoils in a 1-all draw. And at halftime, Lille are goalless against uh, Rennes. So that's what did transpire. Guys, it's been a bit of a tiring day. Allow me wrap it here. We'll proceed with the conversation perhaps tomorrow night in regards to what the final result will be for the game between Tunisia and Mali, but it's destined for extra time. Thank you so much, Pressing Kosi. Thank you so much, Philip. Kisambira. Thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you so much, Property Master. Thank you so much, Pedri, and every single one of you that has managed to be part of tonight's broadcast. Stay blessed, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.